All right, welcome back to another edition of DCA. Right now, I'm looking at the Bitcoin chart. 28,000 is what a Bitcoin will cost you. I've got a lot of questions here today. I want to know why the altcoins aren't running and when the altcoins are going to run. I also want to know if Bitcoin could hit $1 million in 90 days. And if it's not going to hit $1 million, which is probably not realistic, then what is it actually going to hit? Also, I want to know what the FOMC is going to do this weekend. I want to know this week. I want to know whether they're going to raise rates by 25 basis points or whether they're going to go with a zero rate hike. I am looking at the chart right now, and I do see, let's see what the latest odds are. 26.9% for a zero rate hike and 73.1% for a 25 bips rate hike. So I've got all these questions, and who better to chat about these questions with than our friend CTO Larsson and James from Invest Answers. Guys, how are you?
Good. Fantastic. Great to be here.
Amazing. So listen, guys, just before we get on with the highest alpha show on the internet, just make sure you smash the like, subscribe to our channel, and also subscribe to all the other channels, which are all listed below for you guys. Really, these guys make amazing content. I'm here, as you can see, with COVID, bringing you crypto love and crypto wisdom. So just a little like of appreciation would be amazing. I really wasn't going to make it tonight. I'm feeling so under the weather. It's not like me. I never take time off, but today I'm actually feeling a little bit, you know, what's the word?
I think the banking crisis got to you. It wore me out too. It's been a very exciting and draining last 10 days, I think.
What did you make of the Credit Suisse bailout over the weekend?
That was like a gangster took out another gangster down a dark alley in the middle of the night. That's the way I describe it.
but it was quite a weird. It was quite a weird buyout. I mean, it was like last week they came out and said everything's fine. Everything's fine. Like, don't worry, everything's fine. We're solvent. We've got higher liquidity provisions and higher liquidity procedures than everybody else. Then on Saturday is when they said, okay, well, no, we need a takeover, and we're looking at takeover bids. And then by Sunday night, it felt to me like UBS was actually forced to buy Credit Suisse. It didn't do good for anyone's share price. It didn't do good for anyone. I mean, did you guys?
I think it was a great reminder that nothing is safe, right? Credit Suisse, 166 years, I think, track record. It was one of the least affected banks in the previous financial crisis. They had trillion Swiss franc just 2 years ago, and from the top, the stock dropped 98%, and they would have gone bankrupt if they didn't get someone to buy them. 166 years, and then you can blow it all away. Nothing is safe in the bank.
It's funny. I used to go to work, and I used to pass the headquarters of that bank for years and years, Paradeplatz number 8. And the real estate alone, I estimated years ago that it was probably worth $500 million. But the biggest tragedy of this, right? And it kind of builds the whole theory. And I don't know if people looked into it or know what an AT1 bond is, but normally when a bank goes bankrupt or whatever, it's the shareholders get wiped out. And then the bondholders are kind of next in line to get wiped out. But in this case, I think, billions and billions of dollars worth of AT1 bonds were zeroed out overnight. And then the equity holders got $2 billion. Yeah, it's pennies on the dollar compared to what they had a few weeks ago. But that was very strange. It's like, that's why I call it a mugging of what happened behind the scenes. And it just shows you, first of all, the fiat in your bank account is not safe. Treasuries are not safe because they're going to dilute them like hell with debasement over time. And now bondholders aren't safe. So where are people going to go? Anybody? Flight of safety, anybody?
Imagine if there was another currency.
Yeah.
Imagine it was decentralized. James, I have a question for you. So I understood that the buyout was at $2 billion paid to equity holders, right? And when I look at the market cap of Credit Suisse as it's currently trading, it's got a market cap of $8 billion. So, and the price is 95 cents. Where's the disconnect, Jay? If what I read is correct, that the buyout was at 95 cents, what am I missing here?
That's a weird anomaly with stock markets. People have hope and they cling on to hope. There's many companies that are bankrupt and still listed and still running, and people still buy them. They YOLO into them. We saw that with Signature Bank. We saw that with Silicon Valley Bank over the last few days of its existence. We saw that with, Silvergate. People, even though technically it has zero value for equity holders at a certain stage of the game, people still YOLO into it. And I think that's where the discrepancy is right now. The market hasn't fully reflected. But I did hear a number as high as 4 billion being the bid from UBS. And there's some stuff happening behind the scenes with Swiss National Bank, and there's a lot of stuff that's covert. So it is all very complicated, I must say.
So I want to try and understand, like, we know what the problem is with US banks, where there's a problem with duration maturities of T-bills, right? So like they've got 10-year T-bills and people are asking for their money today. But is that the same reason why Credit Suisse went under?
Credit Suisse also had some type of asset liability mismatch, but their biggest issue was a bank run that had been happening since Q3, Q4 2022. They'd just been drained, and they kept on getting bailouts. Swiss National Bank bailed them out, I think, 3 or 4 months ago. And that's just the problem. People lost confidence in the banking system globally over the last couple of weeks, and I think that's the problem. And when people do have those long-dated bonds, hold-to-maturity assets, they just get illiquid with that asset liability mismatch. And that's what takes them down. It's happening all over the world. It's not isolated.
Is this the first domino to fall out of many dominoes, or is the problem now contained?
No, I don't think so. If you think for a second, people said it was idiosyncratic that SVB went down. Then First Republic is having that same option. First Republic, I think 10 banks had to put 50 billion into them over the weekend or last Friday, and it still falls 30%. So it's just, there's so much that has yet, more shoes to drop. If you think for a second that those are the only 2 or 3 banks that had this asset liability mismatch, and they're all in the US, you're wrong, because there's at least 168 in the US that have that, or 186, I can't remember the number. And then around the world, there's all sorts of problems. There's just financial stress everywhere.
Yeah, I mean, the way that it works is that as long as those losses are unrealized, nothing happens until people start taking out their money. Then they need to sell those assets, and then the loss becomes realized, and then it can go on until they become insolvent. And so there can be a lot of companies with these issues, and it's not really out in the light yet.
All right, so that's probably a good segue into talking about 𝗵𝗲𝗍's $1 million Bitcoin in 90 days. I would typically say that that's garbage. I would typically not even retweet or not even look at a tweet like that. Problem is, it's 𝗵𝗲𝗍, and 𝗵𝗲𝗍 is not an idiot. And as I said earlier when I did my show, I read this tweet in January 2020, and I remember thinking to myself, what an idiot. Like, this guy I just thought, what an idiot. And every single thing that he came out with here on the 30th of January 2020, when we didn't even know what COVID actually was, we didn't even know what the concept of a lockdown was, everything that he said came true here. So this is not an idiot. This is a guy who's really, really smart. He understands economics really, really well. He understands Bitcoin really, really well. And he's now calling for a $1 million Bitcoin in 90 days. What's the play here? Is this like the marketing campaign for Bitcoin?
I think it's super smart. I think it is exactly what you say. I think it's a marketing campaign, and I think it's the best spent marketing dollar ever. He's going to get an enormous attention, and I'm not criticizing it. I think it's very smart. And even if he has to pay $1 million, it's enormous value for that marketing, because everyone talking about him. I was talking about him on my video. We're all talking about him now. Everyone's talking about him. But something else might happen also. Because he's doing this, he is also marketing not only himself, but he's marketing Bitcoin. Because now everyone is talking about Bitcoin again. Like, could it happen? Is it possible? Or, he's a smart guy. Maybe we should buy some in case it happens. So he's marketing Bitcoin as well. And assuming he has, a lot of Bitcoin, if Bitcoin goes up, he might not even pay anything. It's the smartest marketing hack in the history of marketing hacks. As someone calculated, if he has 1,000 Bitcoin, if Bitcoin goes up 4% because of this, he hasn't spent a penny, and he gets the most marketing visibility for himself and for Bitcoin at no cost. It's super smart. It's brilliant. I don't think he actually believes it's going to be $1 million in 90 days.
Yeah, I agree. Can I show one thing as well? This would be super interesting.
While you're sharing your screen, he has got himself 150,000 Twitter followers over the weekend, just to give an idea of how good the marketing campaign was.
Yeah, this is my first COVID mind map. I wrote this on January 7th, 2020, before I even knew who 𝗵𝗲𝗍𝗍 was. And it alarmed a lot of people when I put it out there, with estimated death rates. And on January 7th, 2020, I said at least 1 million people would die. It's kind of like the worst case scenario, at least 1 million people would die, but that was it. But there's another funny one. I don't know if this is showing as well. Stop sharing and hang on, I'm going to share this tab instead. This just gives people perspective of what, let me see, how big it actually is, the Bitcoin bet, if that is sharing.
Someone here says 𝗵𝗲𝗍𝗍 didn't initiate the bet, he just took it. Yeah, I agree with you. He took it against this guy. I'm just trying to find the retweet. I think the guy's name is also James, actually, funny enough.
James Medcord or something.
Yeah. There it is. It's James Medlock. It's James Medlock. But I mean, he did take the bet, and he seems to be very confident about it. So here's your screens back up.
Yeah, just to show how unrealistic it is, Bitcoin, as of the time he made it, needs to gain about 11.2% per day nonstop for 90 days to get to that level, which is not far-fetched. But if you look at all the other asset classes of how his Bitcoin bet could be tracked, Bitcoin at 27K is Tesla's market cap, Bitcoin at 100K is Apple, 2.4 trillion, 500K is gold, and $1 million is the size of the US Treasury market of $24 trillion. So it's very far-fetched, to say the least. Now, not saying that we won't get there one day if the money printing continues, especially with what we've seen over the last week. Definitely possible.
Yeah, I think over time we will probably get there because fiat will keep getting less and less worth. Like $1 we keep getting less and less worth. So assuming the whole Bitcoin experiment doesn't fail at some point, at one point it will be worth $1 million, but it's just not in 90 days.
Yeah, I do want to look. I agree with you. I agree with you guys that Bitcoin's not going to hit $1 million in 90 days. But I have also seen what happens when banks start to collapse. And when banks start to collapse, they all collapse very quickly. It's not something that happens overnight. It's not something that happens over weeks. It's something that happens immediately, because as soon as one bank can't pay its obligations, people run on every other bank, and that within 24 hours, every single bank can be closed down. Now, if that happens, I'm playing devil's advocate here, but if that happens, then there's, if you have a Bitcoin, then there's no, there's no value that you can place on that Bitcoin. I've seen that here in Africa, where like Zimbabwe all of a sudden stopped bank transfers and bank deposits. And then if you had $1 of cash or $1 overseas, that was worth a whole lot more money than $1. It was like, I don't know what the number was, but it was worth a lot more. Now, yeah. I can't see the US getting into a situation like that. I really can't see the US getting into a situation like that. But I mean, it is an interesting thought. And I guess my question is, are we going to be upset with 𝗵𝗲𝗍𝗍 if we don't get to $1 million in 90 days? Or are we all going to just agree that it was a great marketing campaign for Bitcoin?
Yeah, I think it will be great. He's marketing Bitcoin, and I like it. I'm not criticizing at all. I'm just, I think it's smart.
Yeah, people over the last week, there's been more adoption of Bitcoin and new wallets than in the history of Bitcoin, which is stunning. But getting back to hyperinflation, there are typically 5 causes of hyperinflation. And literally, find me one that isn't happening in the US. 1, government overprinting money. 2, rapid increase in money supply. 3, loss of confidence in the system. 4, a decrease in the supply of goods and services, supply crunch, we used to call it. And then 5, war. They are the ingredients. And you could argue every one of them is happening now.
That does sound really, really, really scary.
Maybe this is an interesting thought experiment. If this hyperinflation that has happened in many countries over the years, if it could, can that happen in the US? Is that possible? That it's some regional bank that collapses, but like the main banks, the biggest bank, the whole financial system collapsing. Can it happen? I don't know.
Well, I think what you got to look at is not at one bank in isolation, but over the weekend, the US Federal Reserve, Bank of Canada, Bank of England, Bank of Japan, Swiss National Bank, and the European Central Bank all got together. Now, I don't know if this is just to, hey, everybody, let's just print a truckload of money and stabilize the system real fast together, or are they putting the stepping stone in place for a central bank digital currency globally to make it all acceptable? If they all do the same thing at the same time, humans will accept it. And again, tinfoil hat on with that theory.
Maybe it's a good time to get into some TA, Lars. So maybe you can just walk us through. Bitcoin is above 28,000.
Absolutely. I think we have to brag a little bit, guys. We have to celebrate when celebration is due, because we three here, we've been bullish since a couple of months, and it turned out that it was actually the bottom. And this looking fantastic. It's looking even better than in more than a year. We have gotten a confirmed inverse head and shoulder pattern. Here is left shoulder. Here is the head. Oops. I could never draw a straight line when I went to school. I still can't. Here is the head. Here, this ugly right shoulder, but it still counts. And we have a breakout. First time it broke out, it failed. Second time, it succeeded. We're above the neckline. This level here on 25K will act as a strong support. And the target of this one, I always use the log chart. Then you measure the height of from the head to the level here, and then the same height from the breakout. And then we actually come up to 40,000, even just from the pattern target. And I think this is the cyclic bottom for Bitcoin. So who knows how far it can go. We have an excellent chart construction, strong bottom pattern. Trend has turned up since long time. We're above the neckline. We have strong support below. It doesn't get much better than this. And I think that if we look at, maybe that's the next topic, but now that I have it up, if we look at the Bitcoin dominance, now things are actually happening here. We are moving up to the resistance. And in previous cycles, Bitcoin dominance, when it has run up, has gotten much higher than it is now, even though it seems like it has gone up a lot. If it goes up to the levels we were in early 2021 and in 2019, it's still much higher up from current levels. So I think that an ideal scenario would be that Bitcoin runs up against the dollar at the same time as Bitcoin dominance runs up, because what it means then is that a lot of real money is really flowing into the system because Bitcoin is more liquid. Then when that starts topping out and Bitcoin dominance goes down again, like happened in the DeFi spring of 2021 and happened in the ICO altcoin boom of 2017, is that all that money is then flowing back into altcoins. And then because the altcoins are less liquid, it's the same money that's going from Bitcoin over to altcoins, but because the altcoins are less liquid, they go up much more in multiples. So maybe, Bitcoin stays almost flat when someone is selling it, but that altcoin, it goes up 10x because there's almost no liquidity when putting that money from Bitcoin into altcoins. So that would be my ideal dream scenario here, that we ride Bitcoin first, we ride Bitcoin up in dollars, Bitcoin flattens out, doesn't crash, kind of holds, and money starts flowing over into the altcoins. Then we kind of move from Bitcoin over to altcoins, and we absolutely crush it for another cycle. Some altcoins are pumping. I see someone wrote in the comments here. That is correct. But overall, Bitcoin has moved up. And I think that is the narrative, right? The crypto market is narrative run. And the current narrative now is what we just talked about. It's the banking collapse. What is happening? We have a better money. We have the, what Bitcoin was founded on, better money, digital gold, store of value, bailout, chancellor on second bailout for banks. That is the narrative that we have now. And that means Bitcoin is running up. Then later that's going to change. There's going to come new innovation, new narratives, and then probably back over into altcoins. That's my thoughts on this.
So I said earlier on my show today that I remember this from 2019, 2020, when we went through a long bear market, and I held onto a lot of altcoins during the bear market. And then when Bitcoin started running, I thought it was going to be a Bitcoin only run, and I held my altcoins, and I held my altcoins, and I held my altcoins, and eventually I swapped all my altcoins into Bitcoin, and that's when the altcoin run started and the Bitcoin collapse started.
Yeah,
and it's happened to me multiple times, and I've become a little bit smarter now to just hold on to hold on to the altcoins. But there are people that are still claiming that the altcoins are going to be obliterated. So I've been arguing with Benjamin Cowan today on Twitter, because he seems to think that it's the time of reckoning and it's Bitcoin only, and you name it. Could this time be different?
I don't think so at all. I'm very much pro-innovation. Just to clarify, I'll hand over to you, James, just so no one misunderstand here. I don't think so at all. I am very pro-innovation. I like altcoins. I like the innovation that's happening. That is where all the innovation will happen. It will be in the altcoins. And I'm just talking about timing here. And even I'm talking also about altcoins might drop versus Bitcoin during certain phases. It doesn't mean they don't need to drop against dollar at all. They can also go up, just slightly less, perhaps, something like that. Now, James, sorry for talking so long.
Yeah, if I could show a quick screen, a different view of Bitcoin dominance. This is kind of mean reversion going back to 2019. And I added a little red arrow to show where we are. And everything in markets mean reverts. And we are at the multiple standard deviations away from the normal right now for Bitcoin dominance. This is a Bitcoin dominance chart. So this tells me every time, like clockwork, Bitcoin goes typically between that 39% dominance up to 49% and then falls back. And we're at that right now. And we've already seen the leading cryptos, layer ones that are drastically undervalued, are beginning to run, and they started running yesterday. I texted you guys that one image of all the different pairs, all the different leading ones. So I think Bitcoin has been great. New people are coming in. Yes, it can rise. But those that have Bitcoin, not the newcomers, are seeing the value in other assets in relative terms, and they're beginning to pivot into those assets. That's my 2 cents.
I looked at a similar chart, which is this chart, which is the Bitcoin, the alt season chart. And you can see that it's pretty cyclical all the way from 2017. So you can see it like you get Bitcoin season, altcoin season, Bitcoin season, altcoin season, Bitcoin season, altcoin season. You can see it's pretty cyclical. It's as reliable gets. And then what you see now is that we're just below the line now. Now, typically that would probably go down to here and then start on its way up, which talks exactly to what CTO Larsson said in terms of, we'll probably get to a, 49% before we get some kind of real strong resistance.
Exactly. So we're just up at resistance almost now at 40. Now we're at 47. It's not that reliable, right? So we're practically there at resistance area. So if we look at what has happened the past 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, this is the 6th time we're hitting that resistance. And by probability, perhaps it turns there, because it's done that 5 times in a row. If it doesn't, sometimes we don't need to predict the future. I mean, by probability, probably it turns again, just like you said. If it doesn't, however, if it breaks out here, okay, then we have some clues. Then maybe it's a different situation. Then maybe it goes up here. Who knows? But it hasn't yet. So many times, the key to success is try not so much to predict what's going to happen, but just relax and watch what actually happens. And we will soon find out, because we're practically there already. And 5 times in a row, it has turned almost exactly here at 48, 49%.
So listen, this week is a huge week for Bitcoin. You've got two in what I call cataclysmic events happening this week. First event that you have is you have the FOMC meeting. And I mean, the FOMC meetings are usually quite big events, but I think this one is particularly a big event because the market can't decide what Powell's going to do, whether he's going to surrender to the banking system and say, look, the banks are collapsing, or whether he's going to say, we're still dealing with inflation. Even though inflation is coming down pretty well, we're still dealing with inflation. Therefore, the Fed has to continue tightening while the Fed can.
Isn't it absolutely fascinating? If you move to the other tabs there, you can see how this has changed. Every week we're having this show. It's like completely different. It's like totally different. Market has no idea what Fed is going to do. If you move there, you can see in how much the market now thinks that we're going to cut the rates from June, I think.
In July. Rate cuts in July. This is what it's saying. Rate cuts in July, 425 to 500. They're saying rate increases in March to 4.75. Then it's saying in May, no action. And then in June, no action. And then in July, cut. And in September, no cut. And in November, cut. And in December, no cut.
Yep. There's a little chart I just shared as well. If you want to pop that up here, which goes to what the futures are looking at, the Fed funds rate futures. And the question, as I said here, is not how much to hike, but how much to cut as quickly as possible. And again, go back to the 2-year, it'll say the same thing. So this is implying rate cuts 14th of June and maybe even sooner. And that's important.
And to highlight there in the chart you showed, Ran, there's actually 2-step cuts in July, so 0.5 percentage point. So what do you guys think here? Sometimes in the past, it's kind of been a buy the rumor, sell the news type of event. That people are looking forward to these rate cuts and thinking that, okay, then the market is going to run. But actually the market front runs that. So the market runs before, and then when they actually start cutting, it kind of starts dumping instead because the market participants are kind of a step ahead. What do you think could happen this time?
Well, the problem is they've clearly done QE, backstop to the tune of $2 trillion per JP Morgan. So you can't have rate tightening at the same time you do QE. That just is ridiculous. The analogy I like to use is, imagine me on a motorbike on a freeway. I'm doing 150 miles an hour and there's a brick wall ahead and my brakes have just failed. I'm going to take it up to 200 miles an hour. It is just ludicrous. It is illogical. But the Fed was too late hiking, too late recognizing inflation, and the too late stopping hiking. They may do possibly 25 basis points more just to save face so he can bring out his 𝗕𝗏𝗀𝗪. But after that, they will stop and they will cut. But remember, every 25 basis points puts pressure on the US regional banks and bond markets, and everything is on the, most things have actually broken already. So it'll just add more pressure, more fuel to the fire, which means they're going to have to bail out more trillions of dollars to save the whole market in the first place.
Yeah.
And that's where we are, ladies and gentlemen.
A huge credit, James. You have said it on this DCA show for several months that they're driving against that brick wall, and it's going to end with a hike.
Yep. Well, here we are,
right.
Sadly. Yep. But it's actually a good thing. It's a good thing for Bitcoin. And, they're going to, QE to infinity. They have been doing that now since 2018 or 2009. So it's just going to continue as we go forward. And we've heard from the people in office, like the Yellens of the world and others, and they clearly don't know what they're talking about. And all the narratives, it's just ridiculous. So anyway.
Yeah, I think this 1.5 years, that has really been the point where I realized that many of the billionaires, they have no idea what they're doing. They all went bankrupt with the company. The big managers of the big banks, they have no idea what they're doing. It's like Elon Musk shared some tweet, like when they're checking $2,000 credit limit for some auntie, they're doing microscope, right? But when they're looking at their billions of dollars of bond portfolio, they're doing no risk management at all. It's like a child sitting there, totally incompetent. And the central banks and the Feds and this whole circus with the rates has been just a total mess. Many of these people, they have no idea what they're doing, clearly. We should, So everyone watching, don't underestimate yourself, because all these big people, the billionaires, they clearly have no idea what they're doing. You can beat them.
Well, the simple answer is code. If you can code everything into make code law, that's what Bitcoin is. That's what DeFi is. Then this stuff can't happen. It doesn't break. So
look, I must say I was in the camp of no interest rate hike, but I think now I'm leaning towards a 25 interest rate hike before they start cutting.
I think so too. They have the same face. They will say that we will, stick to the plan despite all these issues. We will stick to the plan because 2% inflation target is so important for the economy and the long term, and we will stick to the plan. And they will do it one time to save face, and then next time, or in a couple of meetings, they feel everyone has forgotten about that, so then they just slash the rates big time.
I think, Ran, did you have Caitlin Long on your show once?
I have had her before. I have had her before. I can't remember.
Like, she tweeted something last week or over the weekend, I can't recall, but it talks about the FDIC, which is the deposit insurance in the US, can fund only $128 billion, and the US has $17.6 trillion in deposits. So literally, in order to cover all the deposits of all the banks go under, the FDIC insurance can't even handle the spit in the bucket for the amount of deposits that are there. And the world is waking up to that whole mismatch. Not only do the banks have an asset liability mismatch, but so does the Fed. And the Fed is also bleeding a lot of money. The Fed, I think, is carrying a $1.5 trillion loss in mark-to-market assets for their own bond portfolio. And nobody will be buying US treasuries going forward. Nobody, unless you offer a ton of interest rate. So, and then that'll further increase the deficit. It's just that the whole thing is spiraling out of control really fast, which is kind of concerning.
Yeah, I see the Fed balance sheet keeps growing and growing and growing, which is, I'm quickly going to call it up for you guys. That's what it looks like.
They spent a year doing QT, and they reversed a year of QT in one day. Or we reversed 50% of that quantitative tightening in one day.
There it is. It's a little spike in the thing. That's the they started at a high point of 8,937. They did manage to get it down to 8,342, and now they're back at 8,639. So it just shows that they made a huge mistake.
They can't tighten. They cannot. And half of that is mortgage-backed securities. Again, nobody is a buyer for those assets. They're the only people that will buy it. So they're selling themselves treasuries. Kind of crazy.
Yeah. The other big event this week is the biggest airdrop in crypto, which is the Arbitrum airdrop. We are expecting 1.2, let me get you the right numbers, 1.275 billion tokens to be dropped on the market on Thursday. We estimate, and James, I'm going to turn to you for a model here, but my estimate here is that we're going to get a price around $2. I think $2 is probably where this thing settles, $1.75 to $2. That means that there's an extra $2 billion of stimulus dropped on the crypto market. What does that do for the market on Thursday?
Yeah, well, I can show some of my math and see how it compares to yours. If you guys can still hear me.
Yeah, we can.
Okay, if that pops up. So again, you and I might differ on a few things here. I think you're looking at fully diluted market cap. I'm looking only at circulating coins. I believe only 25% will be circulating when this time comes. We do agree on the airdrop tokens, the 1.275 billion. Now, when you look at this, and I look at Arbitrum compared to Optimism, and I think it's worth double because the users are double, the daily active users. That's my very crude analogy. And I think the price will be somewhere between 40 cents and $1.20, and people will hold. The maximum amount that will be sold will be half of that 1.275 billion, which will result in about $255 million maximum of liquidity coming into the market in the week following the airdrop release. That's my math.
Okay, so what level do you buy this thing at, and what level do you go short?
Oh, I wouldn't buy unless it falls under 40 cents.
40 cents? I don't think it's great.
Otherwise, you're going to be facing immense selling pressure from all the people with the airdrops. You got to wait for that to clear first.
Yeah, I mean, I did show on my show earlier today, I showed the charts of what these airdrops look like. So you can see it goes big wick up, big wick down, goes up again, and then when it gets to a price where people want to start selling, they start selling it until eventually it bottoms, and then we can get the run on the way. Same thing happened with 𝗏𝗏𝗧, big wick up, big wick down, find some price stability, sell till you get to a bottom, and then you can buy it up again. And the same thing also happened with @𝗏𝗏𝗡 and Optimism, exactly the same chart pattern.
How long is the pink?
Exactly. And it usually takes a couple of months, right?
Well,
it's hard to see on the chart here, but usually.
So this one took a month. Optimism took a month. The red section was a month. 𝗏𝗏𝗧 took 2 months, and 𝗏𝗏𝗡 took 2 weeks. So or 3 weeks.
People
so
are
there's
getting
no
smart.
real, there's no real timing. There's no real like formula. Can be anything between 2 weeks and 2 months from what we have.
Yeah.
So would you?
I think it's a good principle. I felt it rarely works to buy right after listing or something like that when it's a new coin. It's almost always better for wait for the sell-off retracement and then try to get in when it's bottoming out, when people start forgetting about it a little bit, and then comes the second wave often.
Would you be buying Arbitrum anyway? Do you think it's a good token to have in your portfolio?
I think,
hard to say.
yeah.
I think, isn't it Ethereum, which is the,
For me,
product here?
For me, I think that optimistic rollups will never be as fast as ZK rollups. And that's why, for me, I don't think that we can justify. I mean, Arbitrum and Optimism are the first very successful, and Matic are the first very successful ETH layer 2s. But I think that things like Starkware and things like ZK rollups are going to be much more successful eventually. And that's why I struggle holding Arbitrum long-term in my portfolio.
Yeah, I'd be worried if I was a Matic holder, because Arbitrum, the adoption has been spectacular, and how it runs a lot of the, the dexes out there is really impressive as well. But again, the risk return, and there's just so many layer 2s. How much value will they all credit to themselves with how much they process? That's the big question. And how much will they charge? So that remains to be seen. And I don't have the answer for that.
I said Starkware, I meant Starknet. Sorry, people are correcting me. I am under the influence of a lot of drugs, as you can see. Cool. Is there anything else that we haven't covered that we want to cover today, just before we call it an evening here today?
Well, how about talking about the rest of the altcoins and where they're going and which ones you think are beginning to pounce? Because typically, Bitcoin runs first, and then people see the relative value of other assets as the tide rises, and people start kind of jumping into some of the alts. And we've seen some of that happening, particularly over the last 24 hours. Names like Elrond, Solana, Stacks, Wax.
I was watching Phantom on the Bitcoin pair. And I thought that Phantom would actually have a breakout on the Bitcoin pair, but I see that got invalidated. I was looking at all of this against Bitcoin, because like now when Bitcoin's running, you kind of want to see how well you're performing against Bitcoin. I looked at Solana Bitcoin. Sol Bitcoin had actually a huge breakout earlier today, but I see it's come down again. So that went all the way up there, and it now came back down again. So it's very hard. I mean, it's hard for me to call it. Like, there are a couple of narratives that have been running. Chinese coins, AI coins, layer 2s. Those narratives seem to recover very quickly.
Yeah, they sure did.
Yeah, I mean, it's a very exciting time, and I think it's definitely time to start paying attention to the altcoins. If we get this turnaround in the Bitcoin dominance, as we talked about before, that is really time to wake up, because the gains in these altcoins in terms of multiples can be crazy. You just need to get a couple of them right. It don't need to be right every time, because when it actually works, it's crazy. It's crazy on the downside. It's crazy on the upside also. So it's a very exciting time, I think. It's one of the most exciting times in the market in years. It's been exciting when Bitcoin turned around, and now if we start getting altcoins running also, boy.
Yeah, I hope so. I hope the altcoins run starts soon, because a lot of people are starting to lose hope and lose faith. So I really hope the altcoin.
I remember when I got into crypto, I was so excited about all the altcoins. That was in the spring 2017. And then they kept dropping against Bitcoin, dropping against Bitcoin, dropping against Bitcoin, dropping against Bitcoin. And the beginner I was then, I gave up on many of these. Like Link, I had early, and then after that around 100x after I given up. So I learned the same lesson as you talked about there, Ran. Need to cannot just close the lid on these ones. Just because something backs up a lot doesn't mean it's dead. It can
So what do you think?
You think
take Benjamin Cowen the bet around altcoins?
I want to see first what happens with this. I try not to predict so much. I try to just follow what actually happens. If we have a breakout of Bitcoin dominance across that resistance line I showed, okay, then Bitcoin might run further before it turns around. But if it turns here and alts start running, yeah, then we have altcoins.
Alrighty, guys. Listen, I'm feeling like I'm like I need my bed. So let's call it.
Yeah. Get well soon. Get well soon, my friend.
Well, probably next week. I'll see you guys. Actually, no. Next week I'm not with you guys. Remember that I'm on vacation next week. I'll hopefully see the Banter fam tomorrow if I feel better. If not, I'll definitely see you guys on Wednesday. Until then, thank you guys and trade well.
Good to see you, CTO. I'll see you all later.